Hi everyone. In this lecture, I'll be talking about how we can develop a better mindset to become better reasoners. In so doing, I will also be introducing more aspects of what reasoning is, which will help us when we start introducing formal tools for modeling reasoning in the next couple weeks. Before I begin, however, I would just like to mention that you should check the course website for an announcement I made today about when the office hours are happening tomorrow. In that announcement, there also are a couple more updates which are worth looking at as well. So let's begin the lecture. So in this lecture, which will consist of this video and one more after, again, as I just mentioned, I'll be talking about ways in which we can develop a better mindset for becoming better reasoners. In this video, I will be talking about two aspects of that mindset, which is curiosity and thoroughness. So in this video, some of the things that we'll cover are certain aspects of this mindset in order to become a better reasoner, and this mindset overall will be called the mindset of discovery. We'll also learn about two kinds of beliefs, different stages of reasoning, and then two issues with how we begin reasoning, which are possibility freeze and restricted search. And we'll quickly see some ways of remedying those issues with how we begin reasoning. So overall, the mindset which one wants to develop in order to become a better reasoner is one wants to develop a mindset of discovery, as opposed to a mindset of defense. So as we will see, when you're very defensive about what you believe and when you argue, that's not conducive to reasoning well. Instead, we should develop a mindset where we're interested in discovering the truth. Okay, and we'll see a important element of what makes these things mindsets are different attitudes and emotions which we undergo. And understanding what attitudes and emotions are relevant to these two different mindsets will actually help us understand how to recognize those within ourselves and become better. So when we're on the defensive, these are the kind of things that happen. So in this picture, imagine that you're a soldier in the middle of battle. In such a case, I suppose you'd feel elevated adrenaline, and you'd have many reactions that are rooted in reflex. So you want to be protecting yourself and your people around you in order to defeat someone else. Okay, so the characteristics of defensive kind of mindset are elevated adrenaline and reflexive reactions that are meant to protect yourself and defeat the enemy. In contrast to the mindset of defense, consider instead of a soldier, a scout. The scout's role is not to attack or defend, but rather the scout's role is to understand. The scout is supposed to give the best information about how things are. So the moral of this analogy between a soldier and a scout is that we should, when we're trying to develop the mindset to be good reasoners, think of ourselves as scouts. We should think of ourselves as trying to discover objectively how things are, as opposed to someone who is in the heat of battle trying to protect themselves and defeat the enemy. So to break down into some more detail this mindset of discovery, here are the three components. First, curiosity. Second, thoroughness. And finally, openness. And in this video, I will be going over curiosity and thoroughness. So the notions of curiosity, thoroughness, and openness obviously have to be further refined. So here are the ways in which these ideas can be unpacked in a bit more detail. For curiosity, we have the idea that we have to have confidence in the things we believe only in proportion to the evidence we have for them. For thoroughness, in more detail, what that means is that we have to be thorough in proportion to the importance of the question. So there are some questions that are not very important. So for instance, suppose someone asks you how many blades of grass there are on your front lawn. So because that question really doesn't matter, it's not something that we should do a thorough investigation of. Whereas we'll see there's many different questions, other questions which are much more important and for which we should conduct a thorough investigation. And finally, for openness, to unpack that in more detail, what that has to do is fairness to other possibilities than the one that we initially favor. So we should be open to the possible truth of other possibilities than the one we currently accept. In the last lecture from 2 days ago, I talked about 3 aspects of how System 1 type reasoning can influence the way we think and do so in a negative way sometimes. Okay, and these 3 things were stubbornness, shortcuts, and certain motivations, background motivations. And these 3 aspects of a mindset of discovery are meant to cure or remedy or be responses to the negative aspects. So instead of being stubborn, we should be curious. Instead of taking shortcuts, we should be thorough when it's important to be. And instead of being motivated to hold on to the beliefs that we already hold, we should be open to other possibilities. So, to begin with curiosity, the first of these 3 elements of a mindset of discovery, we can ask, what does curiosity feel like? So, in order to answer that question, I want you to reconsider for a moment the contrast between the defensive mindset and the discovery mindset of the soldier on the one hand and the scout on the other. There are many different emotions that these two feel. So with the discovery mindset, we feel relieved and happy instead of ashamed when we have to revise our beliefs. And we also welcome conflicting evidence because it helps us discover how things are. And this is as opposed to being hostile or upset over conflicting evidence and the possibility of having to revise our initial beliefs. In addition to this difference of emotions between a mindset of discovery and a mindset of defense, there's also a difference in values. So people who are genuinely curious and have the mindset of discovery are more likely to think it's virtuous or valuable to test their beliefs against conflicting evidence. Furthermore, one who has a mindset of discovery will be less likely to say that someone who changes their mind is weak. So when we're trying to discover how things are, we do not regard changing one's mind in light of new evidence as a sign of weakness. Whereas when we take the mindset of defense, one might consider, changing your mind as losing an argument or as a sign of weakness. However, that is not the kind of values that the mindset of discovery holds. So, as I've just mentioned, curiosity feels a lot different than defensiveness. When we're being defensive, we feel hostile and upset over having to change our beliefs or someone presenting us with conflicting evidence. Furthermore, some further aspects of how defensiveness feels like is that we feel that there's a me versus them. Or we feel like we're being personally attacked when our views are attacked. Or when our views are being criticized, we reach for rhetorical devices as weapons to use. Okay, so we think of our engagement in an argument as something like a fight or a battle where our things we say are more like weapons. In contrast, we should think of our discussions with others as joint activities in which we're trying to discover together what the truth is, as opposed to fights or battles, which is what how the defensive mindset would conceive of them. So what's important is that in order to become better reasoners, the most important thing is that we need to learn how to feel differently. We have to learn how to feel curious and open and not feel defensive or hostile. And in this course, starting next week and especially in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be diving into using a lot of formal tools in order to model reasoning. And all those formal tools will help, but the reason why I'm having you read this material as an introduction, this informal discussion of reasoning, is that fundamentally the most important thing in terms of you becoming a better reasoner is learning how to feel differently and adopt a different overall mindset. Okay, so I think before we get into the mathematical or logical elements of reasoning, I want to really stress in this first couple of weeks what it means more broadly to become a better reasoner. So many of these different ways of feeling, the defensive versus the discovery way of feeling, have already gone over. Okay, and furthermore, some things that we should learn how to feel differently is that we should learn how to feel proud instead of ashamed when we notice that we might have been wrong. We should learn how to be excited and intrigued when we have the opportunity to encounter evidence that helps us change our minds. We should be particularly excited to find people who disagree with us, because they are likely to have new relevant information on which we can update what we believe and potentially discover truly how things are. So when someone is genuinely curious, their goal is accuracy. Their goal is to figure out how things are, and not to, for instance, win a battle or win an argument. Because the goal is accuracy or discovery, conflicting evidence is welcomed and discussion is cooperative. So, in addition to having beliefs about the way things are, we will see that, especially later in this class when we talk about probability theory, we'll see that we have not just all or nothing beliefs, for instance, believing something or not believing it, but we also believe things with certain degrees of confidence. Okay? So we tend to think in terms of believing something or not believing something, but that is in fact a false dichotomy. Instead, we frequently believe things to certain degrees, or we have certain degrees of confidence. So in the next unit 2, when we look at deductive logic, we'll only be thinking about this kind of binary belief, in a sense, of just full on propositions and what they entail. But that is not the whole story in terms of how our belief and our reasoning works. We also have degrees of belief, and when we in the third unit, when we turn to probability theory, we'll see how we can capture that formally as well. But again, before we get into any of the logic or math, I would like to try to explain to you what these things are more intuitively. Okay, so what is a binary belief? Well, a binary belief is just simply believing something versus not believing it. So suppose you have a cat in your house and you look and you see it on the mat in your room. Okay, in that case, you have the belief that the cat is on the mat. Okay, that's just a simple belief you hold, as opposed to if you were to look at the mat and not see a cat, you wouldn't have that belief. So the idea is that in the case of binary belief, you simply just believe something. But there's many cases in which we don't just simply believe something, but we believe something to a certain degree. Okay, so let's say, for instance, you can't see the mat, but you have good reason to think that your cat has gone there and sat out there. For instance, you know your cat really likes that mat, so you might believe in that case that the cat is probably on the mat, or you might suspect the cat is on the mat, or maybe you've somehow calculated in detail what the chance is, so you think that there's a 65% chance the cat is on the mat. Okay, so these degrees of confidence have to do with roughly the amount of probability you assign to something, and later in this course we'll see how we can formally capture the degrees of confidence we have. Okay, and it's important to recognize that we can have degrees of confidence because it helps us recognize that we do not need to have a full opinion about everything. We can, hedge what we think in terms of thinking that it's probably true, or merely suspecting that it's true, or thinking there's a 65% chance. Okay, so we do not need a full opinion about everything, and we don't have to fully take a side on everything. We can lend only a certain amount of credence to something. Okay, and furthermore, when we have all these different possible degrees of confidence, we can make gentle revisions or small revisions to what we think. Okay, so again, when we encounter novel evidence or conflicting evidence, we don't have to make a deep change to what we think. We can in many cases simply adjust our degree of confidence. So I've just gone over the element of the mindset of discovery that is curiosity, and I also just talked about two different types of beliefs. On the one hand, there are all or nothing beliefs, and on the other, there are degrees of confidence or degree of belief. So now, in the rest of this video, I will talk about the second component of a mindset of discovery, which is thoroughness. So what does it mean to be thorough in your reasoning? In order to understand the place of thoroughness, I want to break down for you the different stages of reasoning. So the first stage of reasoning is search. So first we look for various different potential things that we want to believe. Okay, so various potential hypotheses or explanations of something we see, for instance. So in the first stage, we search for possible beliefs we might hold. Then, once we've accumulated a bunch of different possible things we might believe, we evaluate which ones we'll accept, or which ones we'll accept to which degree. And then once we've evaluated all these different possibilities, we then update our overall beliefs with the ones that we accept. So we can think of the three different aspects of the mindset of discovery as corresponding roughly to different stages of reasoning. So first, curiosity has to do with having the right goal. Okay, so this is a kind of overall value in which when we're reasoning, we have as our goal discovery about how things are. And we do not have as our goal trying to just beat others in arguments or defend ourselves, etc. Thoroughness has to do with the first stage of reasoning, which is searching for what are the possible things we could believe. Okay? And finally, openness has to do with the second two stages in which we evaluate and update once we've searched and discovered a bunch of potential things which we could believe. So here's an example. I want you to look at this picture and I want you to think of what might have caused the fire. So what are some good explanations of how this fire might have come about? Now, often when we're told to consider possible explanations for something happens which is called possibility freeze. And that is the tendency to consider too few possibilities in detail. And what that causes us to be is it causes us to be overconfident in one of the ones that we've thought of. Okay? So it's likely that when you were thinking of possible explanations for this fire, you might have thought of one or two. Okay? Here's, however, some a breakdown of all the different possible ways, or many different possible ways in which a house fire could have started. So, for instance, it could have been cooking equipment left on. So, the stove, for instance, it could have been a heater. It could have been intentional. So, someone could have intentionally burned down their house to collect insurance, say. It could be lighting equipment. It could be from someone smoking and not putting out their cigarette properly. There's also cases in which a clothes dryer or a washer causes a house fire. Okay, and there's a few other causes which cause some fires as well. So what this shows is that when we're looking at when we're searching for what the possible explanations of a house fire are, it's important that we spend time to thoroughly recognize what all the different possible causes are, or the possible things that we could accept as the explanation. And what we want to do is avoid only considering the obvious ones. Okay, so some remedies in order to make ourselves more thorough is that we should spend time reflecting and thinking of as many possibilities as we can. And for each of these possibilities, we should imagine them in detail, and we should also, for each of them, think of reasons that make them plausible hypotheses or explanations. So, in general, we should avoid engaging in restricted search. And restricted search is the failure to consider the full range of possibilities or evidence. So the possibilities here are different explanations or hypotheses. But what is evidence? Evidence is any fact that supports a claim in the sense that learning it should increase our confidence in that claim. So in Unit 3 of this class, we'll see in more detail what degrees of confidence are and how they work by using probability theory. But just note now that what evidence is anything that lends any support whatsoever to a claim. Now, the way in which we can avoid restricted search is by engaging in a thorough guiding search. So what we think when we're doing a guiding search is we think for any possibility that might seem especially plausible to us, we think, what would things look like if the alternative or an alternative possibility were true? And we also think which observations or possible evidence don't quite fit right with my first or the favored view or the first possibility that initially jumped out at us.